Hi, I'm Theo, and these broadcasts are to support the blogs on nomoresea.com's website as well as the online classes. In this episode, part 5 of the Divine Counsel series on the second session of Psalm 82. Welcome back to the No More Sea broadcast, and we're in our second session of the Divine Counsel World Series, Part 4 and 5, second session, Part 5, where we pick up our discussion on the idea of Elohim and the Divine Counsel in an overview of Psalm 82. The word Elohim, plural and singular, might confuse some people. Well, in English we have similar words like sheep, deer, fish that have the same form. Whether they are singular or plural, they have the same form. So you can easily talk about one fish or a whole school of, fish, or one deer or a whole group of deer, and one sheep or a whole flock of sheep, and you're still using that. So this is the same in English and carries through. There are just words that have the same form, morphology, form. The form of the word is the same, and context determines what that word means. And for English readers, we automatically know when sheep is singular, plural, deer, fish, by the context in which the word is used in a sentence. And so the biblical authors do the same with their language. And we have to be careful because Elohim is same form, singular, plural, but we don't have an English equivalent that is the same. So we have to think of it in this way. Verse 6 says, I said you are gods, again, Elohim, sons of the Most High, B'nai Elyon, all of you. And we're going to get into more of this terminology as we further explore the Divine Counsel and the Deuteronomy 32 worldview, and as we explore the rebellions, and as we try to parse and understand the Bible the way it was understood. But there you have Elohim again. And again, it's not talking about Yahweh here, nor Jesus, because it's sons, plural, of the Most High. And so you cannot say this is Trinity, because how many sons of God can be a part of the Trinity? So there's something else going on here. All of you, not both of you. So again, this does not fit. The Bible doesn't fit with what we're saying. And I have met people in my scholastic academic journey who fight me over this. And yet they're unwilling to look at the Hebrew, and they're unwilling to look at a verse like this, where it's clearly, it cannot mean, Elohim cannot mean the Israelite God, cannot mean the Trinity. It just can't. How many sons of the Most High are there that are a part of the Trinity? It doesn't fit with our theology. So the biblical writers must obviously mean something else. It's not that the Bible is wrong. We have misunderstood the Bible, and that's the point. And so we need to refine our thinking so that we better align ourselves to the text. And maybe our tradition needs to be either refined, or our understanding of the tradition needs to be refined. Now, we talked about previously how English texts in the past have masked this, because obviously people who have in their tradition and their understanding something else then choose to translate it a different way, and then you miss it. God takes his stand in his own congregation. There's no divine counsel here. He judges in the midst of the rulers. Again, there's no Elohim here. So in this translation, you have only one God. Interesting here, I pulled up Psalm 82:1 in the 2020 version of the New American Standard Bible. And look what we have here. Now, again, these translations are getting updated all the time. So you have the NIV that was back in the 80s, and then it went through several updates, and now we have the 2011 update. The ESV has been around in the 2000s and has been updated a few times, and now the New American Standard Bible has been updated. And look at Psalm 82:1 in the New American Standard Bible in the 2020 version. God takes his position in his assembly, and there's a footnote there that says the assembly of God. He judges in the midst of gods, so they have come on board. So this is the kind of thing that we like to see in scholarship, where publications, translations, the dialogue is met with academics, and then as those academic data points are fleshed out and discussed and done in open dialogue, then people are free to change what they formerly understood and become better by it. And translations get better over time, trying to reflect better English for contemporary English speakers and readers, but also going back to the text and doing better job with the Hebrew because of understanding grammar and rules and context using the ancient Near Eastern context that surrounds the Bible. So here we have an example of how scholarship is changing the way Bibles are printed and where the direction is going. And it can help you see the importance of what we're talking about in this channel. This is how your English translations can mask what's behind the text, and why something like Logos that is free, something with the reverse interlinear where you can click on the word in the English and look down at the bottom and get all that information related to the original language and help you to parse it. And turning to someone like Dr. Heiser, who is an expert in the Semitic languages, understanding how these terms are used will help you. And in our last video, our part 2, we highlighted Dr. Smith and what he had to say as far as the use of the word in monotheism. Now, in the Septuagint, how does the Greek, and here we have the Lexham English Septuagint, the second edition of the Septuagint, and how that Old Greek translation, how did they do it? So here, remember, just a little backup here, okay, on how we got the Bible. Our Hebrew texts are about complete Hebrew texts that we have are approximately a millennia old, a single millennium old. Okay, so about 1,000 years ago is our best, pretty much complete copies of the Hebrew Bible in Hebrew that went through a long series of edits and came down to eventually where the Masoretic tradition chose one single text to be the authoritative text and chose that text of the Hebrew to be supreme overall. And the outcome of that we have the best surviving manuscripts of that is about 1,000 years old. Yet, about 250 years before Christ, all the way into the 1st century, the Greek translation was occurring of that Hebrew Bible. And apparently they were using different manuscripts because at certain points they translated differently. And this is supported by the Dead Sea Scrolls. So we have an understanding that at times the Dead Sea Scrolls do something different. At times they follow the Old Greek. At times they follow the Masoretic. And it just depends. And sometimes there's no difference. And so how did the Hebrew Bible, prior to Jesus or in the same century as Jesus, how did they? Okay, and these texts that we have of the Septuagint are much older. Much older. They go back much farther, the Greek that we have, than those Masoretic texts that we have from 1,000 years ago. And what do we have here? God stood in the assembly of gods. There you go, Divine Counsel, assembly of gods. And in the middle, he judges the gods. He's judging the gods. He's judging. Okay, you're right, you're wrong. Why are you wrong? Because this is what you did. Students study. Students don't study, they fail. Because by nature, the word student means a person who studies. If you don't study, you will fail the class. Because to be a student, you must study. So, your gods? Well, here's what gods are supposed to do. And you failed. So you will die like men. You're not supposed to die, but hey, you acted more like a man than God. You reflected human passions more than you did godly passions. Therefore, you're going to die just like they do. As Adam and Eve experience privation and are kicked out of the Garden of Eden, which is God's sacred space, so these gods are privated by being kicked out of the council, and they no longer hold sway, and they fall for some, if that's the language to use, or by other means they are separated from God, and separation from God, who is life, equals death. So here we go in the Greek. The Greek supports this translation. That's why the ESV can be translated the way it is and still be held high among many conservative scholars today, because the evidence supports such a translation. Now, I'm not sure where your Bible that you have, how it translates, depends on what its basis is. But if it has gone back to the original languages, here is the Greek. Obviously, you can check it out in Logos if you have the Lexham English Septuagint, and you can, I think the first edition is free, and you can right-click on it and get the reverse interlinear and see the Greek words that are tied to this, and the biblical sense should be pretty much the same. So John Goldingay in his Baker volume on the Psalms, on Psalm 82, says that God, as we understand it, capital G-O-D, God, Yahweh, exercises authority in the world by means of aides who take part in formulating policies and decisions in the heavenly cabinet, where God, Yahweh, presides, and who are then responsible for implementing them. This is how, now Goldingay is a very conservative scholar. Look at the editor, Trimper Longman III. I mean, these are very conservative scholars who defend the faith voraciously against atheists and those who are critical of the history of the Bible. And yet, look, this is, Baker. I mean, come on. These are scholars that are on the same side as confessional Christianity, conservative evangelical scholars who understand this because they have spent their lifetime in the text and in these languages, and they understand it, and they have gone through the text and understood what's happening here. And it's simply amazing, and there's no reason to doubt. They are faithful to the text because this is what the text teaches, not to what someone has held as their tradition above the text. And often we think that other people are holding their tradition above the text, and we point our fingers at them for doing it. And then when it's pointed at us, what do? Do we understand the text for what it's given to us to say? Not what we wish it would say, so that we don't have to face the mirror, the man in the mirror, when it comes to our traditions. And have we understood our tradition properly? If we've misunderstood the text, maybe we've misunderstood our tradition, and our tradition got it right, but we misunderstood both. That is a possibility that we have to check out when we look in the mirror and we examine ourselves and our own understanding. Patrick D. Miller, we've quoted many times here. He, again, states that the rule of the cosmos is in the hands of Yahweh, and Yahweh is Trinity, okay? Yahweh, God the Father, and God the Son, that's all understood there. The rule of the cosmos is in the hands of Yahweh, but the context, okay, the context in which that rule takes place is the activity of the council, where Yahweh's decrees directing the human community and the divine world both, which work in tangent with each other. They work tangentially. They're in sync with one another. And they're all supposed to be in sync with Yahweh's decrees. Whatever Yahweh desires, his will, his kingdom, his rule that is in heaven is allowed to be such on the earth as we surrender to God's will, are set forth, and through whom they are communicated or enacted. This is seen in earlier literature and in later texts. So it's the same. Okay? It's the same. We're going to get into Deuteronomy 32, and that's the Song of Moses, and it's believed to be some of the oldest Hebrew that we have available to us. It's the oldest of what came down orally but was copied first. Deuteronomy 32 is some of the oldest literature that we have that was preserved of the oral tradition that came down to us. So we're going to get into that, okay? It's in the early and in the late, so it hasn't changed that much. And it's interestingly to see that, to follow the parallels of the divine plurality that exists, even in the later text. Heiser and other scholars have demonstrated that this idea of an evolution from polytheism to monotheism. Right here, I want to get this with Patrick Miller, okay? What you see in the earlier literature is monotheism, and this divine plurality. But also what you see in the later text is divine plurality. It's not like they moved from polytheism to monotheism, because the later texts have just as many gods as the earlier text. So it hasn't changed. That theory in scholarship has failed the data points and has come under scrutiny, because there is a divine plurality that exists even in the later text. So we haven't moved from polytheism to monotheism. Those are outdated terms that just don't work with the data points that we have, and has been pointed out by many scholars, conservative or otherwise. And so those terms need to be let go of, because they need to be thrown in the garbage, because they don't work for what we're trying to say. And it's not henotheism again. So check out Heiser's work on that. Then come back and tell me why Heiser's wrong. The narratives of the Pentateuch and Deuteronomistic history show this direction, particularly in the figure of the messenger, Malach, of Yahweh, or figures who function in that fashion. Okay, so we don't have time to get into that right now. We'll eventually get there. But this is just to open your eyes to see. And it's all over the place once you see it. It's all over the place. And so, in your scriptures. So what we want to highlight here is that the Divine Counsel can be seen in this understanding. In Psalm 82, you have some spirits that rebelled, and in the rebellion they chose not to. So I want to go back to that. Think about it. We talked about earlier in the ancient world kings, okay? Kings and one high king. So you have a city-state, and you have one city-state that's above all other city-states, and is believed that their God has blessed them, and they're rightly aligned with the divine decrees, and they're rightly aligned with that. And so they're in line with the divine, and because of that, they're blessed. And that king is ruling all other kings, and all other kings are paying tribute to that king. But say some kings decide to do something else. Then that king, that's the king of all kings, must, as the Most High, then address those who are corrupt in the rebellion and address them. The same thing goes for a prime minister. If in a prime minister's cabinet there are other ministers or members of the government who are corrupt, it's up to the prime minister to clean his house or to resign. So the prime minister cleans it. If the prime minister is corrupt, then the prime minister must be removed and a new prime minister established. And so that's how they viewed the world. The human leaders that rose and fell, the human empires that rose and fell, but also the divine ones, because behind every human ruler was a divine ruler. The human only reflected what was happening in the divine world. It's a direct correlation between the two. That's how they understood and parsed their world. That's their cosmological worldview. And so when a human ruler failed, it was often his failure, and because he failed, then someone else had to take control. And there are many rebellions in the neighboring religions where one god, a son of a god, takes over the high god and takes the place. And it's explained away, just like the Romans explained the death of Julius Caesar. That Julius Caesar did not die in the sense that he was murdered by Brutus. No, he ascended into godhead. He became a god. That's how they tried to cover it up politically, so the people would not go into civil war. But that's how they tried to explain it. And then his son, adopted son, Augustus, was able to carry on as the Son of God. That's how they tried to manage it, to speak to the people, to explain it. So the priests of the religion are trying to explain in the supernatural what's taking place, explain the human history that unfolds before the people, and to keep everything intact and explain it from a divine perspective. And that's what's happening here. And that's the idea that we have going on. Okay? And so, this is the way they understood things. So, the Hebrew Bible, though, Yahweh is never unfaithful. He's always true. He never is corrupt. He never makes a mistake. He's always good. And those who choose to be faithful with him, whether they're divine beings or human beings, those who choose to be faithful with him are always on the right. It's only when those divine beings or those human beings do not rightly align themselves with Yahweh that things go, bad, and they must be fixed. And it requires things to be fixed. So if we go back to what Douglas Knight said about Hebrew cosmology, we go back to that quote and understand how things must be fixed, then we can understand what's going on in Psalm 82. Psalm 82 is a reflection of the failure of divine beings, but also those divine beings are directly connected to human beings who mirror their rule upon the earth. Thank you very much, and God bless you for listening. Stay tuned for more episodes in videos to help you with your journey from nomorec.com.